Yeah, he always has something neat on Facebook.
Okay, well, it is 4 o'clock. We will call to order our committee of the whole meeting and start by recognizing that we're meeting on the unceded territories of the Sechot and Hoopachesit First Nations. Councillors, are there any late items to add to the agenda? Seeing none, any?
I do have something.
Go
For
ahead.
some reason, you only see half of my table. My question is to talk about the pods. Would it be on this one because it would be funds and stuff like that? Little tiny homes, sorry.
I think probably we're not at the point of putting something into budget yet. If we're going to have a conversation about that, I don't think we really have a specific proposal to bring forward.
Okay, so we should wait, maybe talk about it another time.
Sure. Yeah, I think that if we want to give direction to have a conversation on that, we would need to have a bit more information on putting together a project rather than just adding something to budget. There we go. We can see you now, Councillor Solda.
Thank you. Okay, I will wait till next week.
Okay, thank you. And seeing no other items from councillors, Director of Corporate Services, any late items?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And just a notice that we are video recording as we always do, live streaming and recording on YouTube. With that, would somebody like to move approval of our agenda? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Washington. All in favor? Carried, thank you. And we have minutes from the meeting held at 2 p.m. on January 18th, 2021. Somebody like to move adoption of minutes? Moved by Councillor Paulson, seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Any questions about the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And we have one delegation today, Dennis Hickson, to discuss property tax classifications and a revitalization bylaw. Welcome. And Dennis, we can see you, but you are, or hang on, there we go. Oh, okay, there's Dennis, and we have Bob here on behalf of SAN Group. And Dennis, we can see you, but you're muted. Great. So I think you're unmuted now, Dennis. So we have you listed as our first and only delegation today. So typically for delegations, we give approximately 10 minutes for you to make a presentation, and then we may have questions afterward.
Okay, well, I'll start off, Mayor Minions and Council. Well, my name, first of all, is Dennis Hickson, and I'm a property tax consultant, and I'm now working for the SAN Group. I want to thank you very much for permitting us to make a presentation to Council and in this committee. I want to start by saying that the SAN Group has enjoyed a very positive relationship with the city and the community, and that is very much appreciated. I sent out a written copy of our presentation, a full copy of our presentation. I don't think, I was talking to Twyla about an hour ago, and I understand that Council has not received that package yet. Is that correct? Oh, are you? You're muted now.
Yeah, no, that's correct. We have not received your package.
Oh, okay. And so actually I thought that you were going to receive that package, and I was just going to highlight some of these, or summarize some of the highlights of the package that I sent you, but I may have to expand a little bit. So,
sure. And Dennis, I'll just let you know that we often don't receive them before, because the intent in a public meeting is that we do want the public to have as much information as possible as well. So feel free to go, somewhat into depth on it. And we would love to have the formal, the full package as a present or for our reference afterward.
Okay, well, we may need a little bit more than 10 minutes, but we'll try and get it in. The reasons we're coming to council today are twofold. I'd like to address the first reason we're coming to council. We are asking council not to adopt a recommendation, and I'm not exactly sure where the recommendation is coming from, whether it's coming from a group of waterfront industrial employers, or whether it actually is at the point now where it's being recommended by the city administrative staff. Where that recommendation is to equalize the 2021 light industry tax rate with the major industry tax rate. And previously in 2020, the light industry tax rate was at 21.14 mils or 2.14%, with the major industry tax rate at about 5.3%. So if the recommendation is accepted, it will result in a doubling of the taxation rate for light industry tax class. Up until January of this year, the SAN Group expected that the tax assessment for its new remanufacturing plant would fall into the major industry tax class. And it was on that premise that it joined into a group of other waterfront industry owners, that being, as I understand the name, is the Alberni Waterfront Employers Association, with the acronym AWEA. And they were advocating for a major industry taxation stability program. In January, about the same time, the SAN Group realized that its plant was going to fall into the light industry tax class, which is different from the other three players in the waterfront industry group. The other three being in the major industry class. So to continue on in that advocacy group, we found out that it was intended that the tax rate for light industry would be brought to parity with the major industry tax class. And that would result in the light industry tax rate essentially doubling, or more than doubling. The SAN Group now realizes it's treated quite differently for assessment and valuation purposes than the other three groups, being Western Forest Products, the Canadian Maritime Engineering, and Paper Excellence Pulp Mill. So not only would the taxation rate double for the SAN Group's properties from 2020, but their assessed value would stay high relative to the other participants in the AWEA, and therefore we think that there's an unfairness in taxation treatment as a result. I wanted to sort of outline, and in the presentation that will be distributed after the meeting, I just wanted to sort of give you a little explanation of what will happen with the assessment of the SAN Group property, with it being in the light industry the light industry tax class versus the major industry tax class. And as a little primer to assessment and assessment valuation, the assessments for both the major industry and light industry are based on a cost approach to value. And that cost approach is premised on a replacement cost of the value of the plant less a depreciation amount. And then once the depreciation is deducted, you get an assessed value for tax purposes. So, and I'll just interject here. So by raising the tax rate, if the city elects to raise the tax rate on the light industry tax classification, it will it'll essentially bring parity to the tax rate, and the depreciation amounts. Or let me backtrack a bit here. The depreciation factor involved in that equation in determining the assessed value. So I want to differentiate here between assessed value or the actual value against which the tax rates are applied and the actual tax rates. So while the tax rates are at parity, the assessment valuation methodology between the properties that are in the light industry taxation class versus the major industry taxation class vary quite substantially. The assessments, the application of depreciation is the major component to the differences. The assessment for, if you had as an example, if you had the sand group property, which is going to be a remanufacturing plant, if it was in the major industry classification, there is a preferred or accelerated depreciation amount in deriving the assessed value. So the assessed value is the assessed value for the major industry tax classification is going to be much lower than the light industry tax classification. Sorry, the depreciation amount is going to be greater for the major industry classification versus the light industry classification, which results in an assessed value that is going to be much higher as a result of the sand group being in the light industry tax classification than if it were in the major industry tax classification. And the amounts that I've estimated in my primary brief approximate, after 10 years, the assessed value of a light industry type property like the sand group's remanufacturing plant will, there'll be a differential of between 40 to 50%. It'll be the assessed value will be 40% or 50% higher after 10 years because of that accelerated depreciation amount that's applied to a major industry plant. So we believe by bringing the tax rate to parity creates a substantial and material tax disadvantage and unfairness to the sand group's property, which is going to be in the light industry tax classification. So after, and I had that initial estimate of 40 to 50% after 10 years, and in fact after 20 years, the assessed value differential will be about 100%. So the sand group properties assessed value will be 100% higher than if it were in the major industry tax classification. So that's a critical piece to our concerns about bringing the taxation rate up to parity with the other three, well, up to parity with the major industry tax classification. There was one other thing I want to bring to the attention of council as well, is that not only it's assumed that with if the taxation rate from a municipal perspective is brought to parity, there is other taxing authorities as well, and the school tax rate for light industry versus major industry is actually higher for light industry than it is for major industry. So another perverse result of maintaining or bringing the tax rate, the municipal tax rate, up to parity with the light industry tax rate is that the overall tax rate that the sand group would be paying would be higher than the other industrial players in the city of Port Alberni. Another thing I wanted to bring up as well, the other three players in the municipality are now, probably because their assets are older, they're probably at about 20% their assessed value. And a lot of this is focused on assessed value because of the light industry tax rate designation has this impact of differing valuation methodologies. But because the other three industrial properties in the municipality of Port Alberni are a little older, they're probably being assessed at 20% of their replacement cost value. In year one, the Sand Group property is going to be assessed at 100%. So the differential related to the actual replacement cost of the facilities again creates a distinct tax disadvantage or unfairness, in my view, to the Sand Group. Another key point in the brief that will be handed out is that the proposal of increasing the light industry tax rate to I think it's 5.368% for 2021 is not in keeping with the tax rates that you would find for the light industry tax classification in other like municipalities. In the brief that that you will see afterwards, I've picked 35 other municipalities in the province of British Columbia, and the average light industry tax rate is about 2.13%, which actually compares favorably with the 2020 light taxation tax rate that was in place in the city of Port Alberni. So if the light industry tax rate were increased to 5.368%, as is proposed, the rate would be roughly twice that of the average in other light communities. We feel that the result would be that there would be a clear disincentive for light industry players to invest in Port Alberni. It would send a signal that Port Alberni is not industry friendly. So that sort of summarizes the key points that I have I've addressed in that main brief, but that main brief will expand on that if you care to read it after the presentation. Our second request of council is a proposal that council revive a form of its lapsed 2006 revitalization tax exemption bylaw. As I understand it, the city had a revitalization tax exemption for industrial properties, and I'll refer to the revitalization tax exemption as an RTE bylaw, and that was in place from 2006, and I believe it lapsed in 2010. The Sand Group believes that it has met all the intended objectives that the RTE bylaw had intended to reward when it was in place from 2006 to 2010. The Sand Group, I've taken a look around the province, and to my knowledge, there's only one other forestry-related plant that's under construction now. It's in Fort St. James, and it will be eligible for an RTE bylaw tax exemption. The Sand Group believes that the city would benefit from being able to advertise that it had in place, had an RTE in place for prospective industrial investors, and that the RTE had been successfully utilized with a proponent. The Sand Group believes that an RTE would also help to generate more industrial investment in the city. And it's particularly at this time when the allied forestry industries are in a healthy condition. So just to highlight the two proposals that the SAN group is putting forward to council. We are asking that the council not adopt a recommendation to equalize the 2021 light industry tax rate with a major industry tax rate. We propose that the 2021 light industry tax rate should be maintained similar to the 2020 level of 21.14 mils or 2.14%. Second, we ask that council give consideration to reviving a form of its lapsed 2006 revitalization tax exemption bylaw, and that tax exemption bylaw apply to the SAN group's new and planned industrial ventures in the city. And that's it.
Thank you. I'm echoing.
Yeah.
Can everyone hear that? Or is it just on my end?
I can hear you.
You're
fine.
echoing.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to switch over to my other computer in a minute. Oh, maybe it's gone away. Thank you very much for your presentation, Dennis. Appreciate it very much. And it aligns really strongly with some of the conversations that we have been having as a council. We very much want to make sure that, we are a community that recognizes when investment is made and looks to incentivize the right type of investment in our community. And I think we feel very strongly that the type of forest industry that, SAN Group is really creating in our community is the type of industry that we want to see incentivized. So we're really pleased with the work that SAN Group has done. And have been talking a lot about opportunities for different ways we can support them and the vibrancy that they're bringing to our community. And on the other end of that, I am personally a little frustrated because, what you're asking for now is the complete opposite of what SAN Group through the Waterfront Industrial Taxpayers Association has been asking us for many months. So, we've spent a lot of time, a lot of energy as a council, considering the request from the SAN Group that is really now the opposite of what's being asked for. So, recognizing that you're bringing forward something different, I understand that is SAN's current ask. But, I think it's important to point out that we've been trying to serve the SAN Group and make sure that, the significant investment that they're making in our community and in the employment sector of our community has been recognized and appreciated through the work that we've been doing over the last few months that is now being asked for something different. So, and that said, I am a big supporter of a revitalization tax exemption. I was pushing for that along the way while SAN Group was asking for something different. So I think we can move past the frustration piece of that, as I'm sure you can recognize, and focus in on the request that you have made, which I think is very worthwhile us having a good discussion about.
Good. Yeah, if I could add a comment, it was a bit of a game changer. I think the SAN Group and I think the AWEA group all had expected that SAN Group would be lumped into the major industry tax classification, and it's only with the realization that they're not being put into that classification that we had to do the about face. So certainly we apologize that we have been guiding council towards in one direction and suddenly reversing our position, but we were caught a little bit surprised as well that the property was actually going to be assessed in the light industry tax class.
Understandable. Thank you very much. Council, are there questions? Start with Councillor Paulson and then Councillor Corbeil.
Just as a refresher, could somebody on staff make the delineation or the difference between heavy and light industry as we apply it to taxation, just for clarification for myself and for anybody who might be watching? Andrew?
Andrew popping up. Go ahead, Andrew.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So the way that we've treated light industry and major industry historically is to have the similar rates. Obviously, in 2020, there was a change in the assessed value within light industry, so that's the reason why it did drop down from, around the mid fives down to the 2.1 range in 2020. So historically, there have been reasons for, or not reasons for, but it has been linked together. So obviously, when you compare 2020, it is a different rate because of that increased in value, because the property prior used to be catalyst property in class 4. And then when it was realized that it was a remanufacturing facility, that's when that increased the light industry. The overall tax burden that has been applied to those two property classifications has been 22.64% for the last 3 or 4 years, and that's been kind of locked in across every single classification. The prior year's tax burden has been applied throughout the last 3 or 4 years equally, and hasn't changed. So.
Thank you for that. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Dennis, for your presentation. And I think I could speak for all of council that we're very appreciative of the SAN group and everything that they're doing for our community. I guess my question's quite simple. Had the mill been deemed to be heavy industry with the ability to depreciate, I think, as you said, at a faster speed, would there be an issue had it been deemed to be heavy industry?
I think there. Well, I would probably defer to the SAN group on that, but from what I understand, it still came as a bit of a surprise. Well, no, if they'd been in the major, if they'd fallen into the major industry tax classification, they would have known, they would have seen, and they would have been aware of what prior major industry tax class rates were. So I'll take that leap and speak for them that I think under those circumstances, they with perhaps the RTE bylaw put in place, they would have been comfortable with that proposal.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you. Other questions from council? Okay. So Dennis, just want to thank you for coming and presenting today. And again, just reiterate again how much we do appreciate the investment that SAN has made in our community. Every time I tour the mill site, well, I guess we can't say mill, a remanufacturing facility, class 4. Every time I tour the site with Kamal, I'm always just blown away by his passion for, the efficiency that they're building and, the technology that they're bringing in from around the world. And it's very clear how much they care. The SAN group cares about what they're doing in the community, and we're really thrilled to have them. So we will be having more conversations about this as we continue through our budget process. I think we're all going to want to really have a good look at the document that you've provided, and we will certainly reach out if we have additional questions. And
Okay.
Bob, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just one comment. I think that the SAN group is very happy that being in Port Alberni and the relationship we do have with council. And it is, that's home for a lot of our people. And we're taking a look at that and moving forward with it. We want to make sure that we've got a good base and that the continued support from council. And we plan on coming through and delivering with what we're saying we're going to do.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Okay, so with that, council, we will move on from delegations. Seeing no further questions still for Dennis Bob. Perfect. Okay, and we will go into item E, unfinished business, the 5-year financial plan, 2021 to 2025, bylaw number 5023. And we've got the Director of Finance to provide committee with a verbal overview of where we're at. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So today we're going to be walking through the financial plan and providing council with a summary when it comes to expenses and revenue. A summary that is by section or by department. When it comes to our capital plans and projects, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that and go line by line and discuss the capital projects. And then, of course, the non-market change impact. And we've seen that over the last few years in the city of Port Alberni, and that's a good news story. So what I'll do is I'll just share my screen and we can start walking through. And just confirm that everyone can see the revenue section of the financial plan at this time. Okay. So when it comes to our general purpose taxation, we are currently sitting at a draft plan of 3.95%. This is quite a bit lower than we initially planned in 2020. At that time, we had a 10.2% increase. With the changes and shifting of priorities and using some of our reserve funds, we've been able to drop that down. And as we look at our capital projects, I'll point out a few situations that help support bringing that from a 10.2% down to the 3.95. So I'll focus on some areas of change and items, and if council does have any questions as we walk through, it might be beneficial for us to address those as we are walking through, so we can either answer the questions or follow up and confirm that we'll add that to our Q&A. So I think the general purpose taxes are all pretty straightforward. When it comes to our special levy, those are all remaining fairly consistent. It's a lower dollar value, but this is our off-street parking that's assessed for certain properties that benefit from the parking that is provided through the city. And that's just the maintenance costs that are incurred. The utility tax, you can see, has gone up over the prior year from just under 700,000 to 725. And that's a realization of the actual amounts that we are receiving from our utility tax. So that includes our BC Hydro, our gas, and Shaw and TELUS. So those are a utility tax that's paid on amounts that they receive in the city of Port Alberni. Our federal grants in lieu of taxes are fairly consistent. Where there has been a slight change, we've made those adjustments based on the prior year's amounts that we've seen in the actuals that we've received. When it comes to our prisoner expenses for the RCMP, we realized a lower amount than we've had in the financial plan. With that, we've dropped the amount based on the prior past years. In 2020, we actually seen quite a significant drop on the recoveries, the actuals, and we'll provide the actuals hopefully in March to finalize our surplus moving forward. But with the prisoner expenses, the costs incurred are usually recovered, so there's an offset in the expense side. But these are reflective of what we've seen in the prisoner recovery expenses from the RCMP. When it comes down to our next item that is a significant change from the prior year, it's the public transit revenue. And what we've seen with that is obviously with COVID, we've seen a drop in revenue, but there has been some support from senior levels of government to initiate a restart, a safe restart program. And you know, council can be commended for their actions in March of last year, because we did see the collection of fares cease from late March until early June. And then obviously we didn't drop the level of service because it was an important service that was provided to the community, to those that needed to still do their work and get to appointments. And it was noted that many communities across BC continue that service, and the senior levels of government have provided some support for that. With that, we see the revenue drop, but we are receiving those restart grant funds from senior levels of government. So, and that's through BC Transit and our annual operating agreement that was amended for 2020-2021. Next up, when it comes to the solid waste services that we have seen costs increase year over year because of the cost to tip, but also we are seeing a change in the level of service provided to the community. We will be moving to a 3-stream system, so all the collection will be done by city trucks moving forward. So that includes our garbage, which is currently the only service that we provide. Secondly, we'll be taking on the recycling component. We have split bay trucks that allow for this to occur. So we can do 2 pickups with 1 truck at one time. With that, the ACRD will be providing a contract to the City of Port Alberni to include the recycling contract that they have with Recycle BC. With that, we will receive the funding to conduct that collection. That is currently being provided by a contractor, and that will cease once the city takes over. With the residential collection also, we've seen a cost of service provided to the average single family house of about $100 per household. That's been in place since 2012. When I actually look back to 2009, the cost for garbage was about $115, and that was included on our tax notice. And back in 2012, that was shifted to our utilities. So there's been some changes over the years, but we still provided one of the lowest cost waste collection services on the island, but we do provide a lower level of service than other municipalities. So we are moving into the same range as far as service levels, and we'll see an increase in the cost of providing that service. So currently it's about $135 for each household for collection, the expense, and we'll get into that a little bit later as far as the expenditures for solid waste. So we see an anticipated cost of $180 for each single family residential home for 3-stream residential collection. When it comes to the economic, well,
Councillor Washington just had a question.
Yeah, certainly.
Go ahead, Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Andrew. So the three-tier system we're going to do for our garbage, recycle, and organics, that includes every household in Port Alberni. We're not going to make it an option if you don't want to do organics, or if you want to do your own recycling. It'll be all or nothing.
Good question, Madam Mayor. I think to Councillor Washington, municipal provided waste services are all in. Every residential household will be provided the service. There's no opt-in or opt-out. It's all or nothing. So I think it's important that we align our program with what is required through the Alberni Clay Plot as far as taking waste to their landfill, and ensure that we provide good diversion strategies and options for our residents to extend the life of the landfill. So when it comes to the economic development component of the revenue, we've seen some grant funding through the Food Hub in the prior year. So obviously the revenue that's seen through the economic development component is up much higher in 2020, but of course this is dropping down to the regular amount. And you can see the amount moving forward is the amount that we see from the Alberni Clay Plot Regional District as far as their contribution to the economic development service. And that's about 21,833 every year.
Thank you. And just for information on that, at the last ACRD meeting, 2 directors did talk about increasing that amount for this year, given COVID and just some of the challenges that economy has gone through. So we will be having that conversation at the ACRD board over the next couple of weeks.
So the revenues for the Alberni Harbor Quay have been quite consistent and planned for similar amounts year over year. Now, when we come to our recreation facilities and everything Parks and Rec, we've definitely been impacted from COVID, and our revenues are down significantly. And it has been a difficult planning process as far as anticipation of what we can provide and what we may be able to undertake in this COVID year. But we've done our best. We've looked at the amounts that we had incurred in 2020, and what you see on the left in the budget 2020 is the amounts that we made some last minute changes to impact Parks and Rec, because that was the area that we saw some areas that we wouldn't be able to provide service to, and that realized some of the reductions that we saw in the 2020 financial plan to get it down to 1.9%. So obviously with the COVID restart funding, the province has provided us with the ability to undertake programming and provide the services that the community needs in these times. For instance, the pool, we still continue to operate the pool, and some of those funding amounts that we had in the plan. These are revenues that we anticipate, but if there's any shortfall, we do have the ability to use the COVID restart funds if we fall short there. Obviously, with the hope that we'll see some improvement in the ability to use our facilities and to provide programs within Parks and Rec, we hope to see some of these revenues increase as we move through the year. The museum sales of service has dropped. That's based on some of the indicators that we've seen over 2020. We've reflected the financial plan to do that, then returning back to normal levels in the following years. When it comes to the business licenses and fees and whatnot, it's been fairly stable, but we do anticipate some increased costs or increased revenue, to our building permits and development fees. We've seen a significant increase, but we've also looked at possibilities towards the end of the year of increasing the anticipated fees for service to reflect cost recovery for the services that we provide for building and planning. And then, as far as returning of our residential penalties on our late utility bills, we see that return back in 2021. We did put a holiday on that for the public, or the homeowners, in 2020 as a COVID measure. And as we walk through here, the gaming revenue, we have budgeted to receive the full amount of gaming revenue. With that, we do have some expenditures that are in the financial plan. Obviously, we won't receive that until the casino reopens up, but this is an area where we can still provide the funding to the community groups and Mclean's Mill and other things to use those gaming funds that we had used in the past. So, and then of course the COVID restart grant is here. As we get the actuals for 2020 in, we'll start to populate the revenue loss and the expenditures incurred for COVID, and we estimated that at $1.2 million in 2020, and we'll recognize that and bring that into the actuals for 2020, and then the remainder will be in 2021 for us to address any needs for COVID as we walk through the 2021 year, sorry. So I think the remainder of this financial.
Sorry, thanks, Andrew. We had two people just pop their hands up, starting with Councillor Solda and then Councillor Paulson.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the gaming funds. Like we put down for the budget 445, but the thing is, if we don't have gaming, what happens? I mean, are we going to take it out of the COVID restart money, or how can we budget if we're we're already in February. So I'm just kind of curious, Andrew, how that works.
So, Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Solda, what we'd like to do is provide that as the possible revenue that we'd receive normally in order to fund those expenditures that we would normally have. And then if there's a shortfall, we can pull in the gaming fund. So if we do have a restart in the casino in the second or third or fourth quarter, then that would see some revenue. But to offset that, that's where we are able to attach some of the COVID restart funds as far as revenue shortfalls. So it's identifying, what we plan, and because of COVID, we need those restart funds. So it's a way of linking that expense or that revenue to the COVID restart funding.
Okay, so the restart grant that we received, we're not going to go over it. We're just in case it doesn't come through, right? There's other issues that we're going to have that we will need the startup grant. So I guess we're going to be right on the nose. Correct?
Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Solder, I think with the unknown as far as public health orders and so much uncertainty, we tried to do our best as far as reducing the expenses in Parks and Rec, reducing the revenue that we receive in Parks and Rec. But when we don't realize the revenue, or we incur expenses higher than planned because of what's undertaken in Parks and Rec, or the unknown revenue that might come in through gaming, that's the intention of those COVID funds, is to continue to operate, continue to provide the services that we provide, and able to use those COVID funds if we do have a shortfall. So.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was kind of going through the page, maybe it did touch on this, but the top of the page, miscellaneous revenue, up 103%, and then is 192.7 right across the board. I'm a little unclear what this represents under miscellaneous revenue. And I gather the 94.5 in 2020 was revenue deficiency due to COVID, maybe? But maybe you could just clarify miscellaneous again for me. I apologize if you covered this.
Yeah, and Madam Mayor, to Councillor Paulson, I didn't cover this, and what I can do is I can get some details and include this on the Q&A as far as what's wrapped up in there. Can't recall off the top of my head. I don't want to make a statement on that, but I'll have some information on why that's gone up, or whether it was a decrease from COVID in 2020.
Great, Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To our line item on the community gaming revenue, with the Colson Group purchasing the casino part of the gaming center, people out there were wondering if they were still going to contribute to that revenue fund.
Yeah, great question, Madam Mayor. What I think has occurred is a change in ownership of the license and building, but with the agreement that we have, it's a host community agreement that every community has throughout BC for revenue for community gaming. So we still anticipate receiving the revenue from the community gaming organization for the province.
Thank you.
So moving on to transfers to other and other collections that we incur. So what we see here is what we incurred in 2020 reflective in the financial plan. So some increases obviously over what we had in the financial plan, but we should receive all these amounts before we finalize our financial plan before adoption before May 14th. Okay. So moving on to our expenses now. If there's any other questions related to revenue, we can answer that now. And If not, we can move on to the expenses.
I don't see any other questions about revenue, so I think we're fine to move on to expenses. Thanks.
Thank you. When it comes to legislative services, I'm going to be going section by section. So with this is the mayor and council remuneration, and these are increasing year over year based on CPI expectations, based on our policy per CPI. So when it comes to the administrative, I should mention that we did mention at our committee of the whole meeting in January that we are doing a market review, and as you can see in 2023, council will have information brought forward to make a decision. But what we've done is we've included possible increases based on that market review for remuneration for council, and council can take that information and decide how they want to amend the policy if they want to. When it comes to the administrative component of the financial plan, what we see here is just the CAO and corporate services. These are all, again, by policy. When it looks at the legal expenses, we mentioned that we'd be separating those out for bylaw and planning and development services. So now you see the legal expenses that are incurred or planned to be incurred in the administrative component of the financial plan. That, of course, moves down to the bylaw enforcement component. The increase is higher than 10%, obviously 11.14. That is in part for the legal expenses that we've shifted from legal expenses and administrative down to bylaw enforcement to be more reflective of the cost of providing service for that function. When it comes to financial management, that is the change here for the audit costs that we've incurred, and we will continue to see a drop because of the contract that we signed with M&P. So that's the reasoning, and we don't anticipate the support work that was required from the 2020 year.
Thank you. A question from Councillor Kuhn.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm following correctly. So you mentioned the legal fees. Does that mean each department keeps their own records as to the costs of the legal fees then?
Madam Mayor, to Councillor Poon, what we are looking at is just shifting some of the costs out of the general legal fees that we incur and moving them to both bylaw and planning services, just to show that these are the activities that are driving the cost for those legal expenses, and it's not just wrapped up all in one line item. Beyond that, we don't anticipate splitting that out per department, but it was just within those three line items that we looked at changing how we display the legal expenses.
Okay, just the three then. Thank you.
Thank you.
And other common services, this includes much of City Hall, the expenses that we incur for hydro, telephone and whatnot. And we also have some maintenance work that's required at City Hall. So we do have an increased financial plan budget, but that would be returning back down to normal levels in the following year in 2022. Every 3 years, we undertake, oh, sorry, I missed the information systems. So just like legal expenses, we saw a decrease in the information systems, and we spread the cost of software that's incurred by specific departments and included that in their departments to be more reflective of providing that service for each section or function within the financial plan. So you'll see this drop, but we also included some increases of $65,000 for additional software needs that we anticipate for information systems in 2021. It's important that we have up-to-date software, secure software, and IT services has identified a need and to mitigate any risks that we see with our information systems. Appraisals, you'll note that are incurred every 3 years. We had a last update in 2020 or 2019, I believe. So we do this for our insurance purposes to make sure that the values of our buildings and structures are reflective of what we are insuring in insurance policies that we have. Within HR, there is a planned increase year over year to do a market review for exempt staff. So we have included increases in this area here that would be brought to council for review. So that's included in the financial plan. When it comes to the general administration, general government services, the councillor, we'll start with the training and development for staff. In 2020, we reduced the anticipated expenditure 50% based on the need to relook at cost reductions for COVID. Obviously, we continue that impact this year, and these include some of the needed training that we have to undertake. So this is at 70% of our normal level. And moving back to 100% in 2022. With council, we're moving back to 100% of the council travel and development. Obviously, there are some conferences towards the end of the year, and if there is a possibility of having some in person as we get to the end of the year, we want to ensure that we have the financial ability to undertake that and allow council to go to these conferences that they normally do. So that's been returned back to 100%. The last meeting, we did make an amendment to the financial plan to reduce the insurance costs. So obviously in 2020, we did see quite a significant increase, but we dropped that down a little bit with some risk mitigation and some review of our possible exposures within our insurance expenditure line item. So when it comes to the police protection that we have a contract with the RCMP for, we do plan on having 30 out of the 34 positions budgeted. Historically, we've seen utilization of our RCMP budget by around, it's usually around 30 members on average. Although this past year, we've seen an increase in the amount of utilization of the RCMP members, and we are much closer to the 34 members that we do have an agreement with the RCMP. So we'll have to keep an eye on this to see if this is an anomaly, but moving forward, we do have the emergency reserve that we have for police services.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil, did I miss you? You had a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Andrew, you talked about appraisals every 3 years, and you talked about insurance. Where in the budget is the, I believe we have to do a risk assessment for the new insurance policy. Is that itemized anywhere?
Madam Mayor, that's a good question. We have the insurance amount here. So this was just under or just over 400,000 by the time we have some lingering policies with Aon and our change in MIDC. So this line item will provide us with that risk assessment funding to undertake that in 2021.
Thank you. And Councillor Solda?
Yeah, Andrew, regarding green timbers, have we allocated anything in there? Because we don't know how much green timbers is going to cost us. So for the RCMP?
Yes, Madam Mayor and Councillor Solda, what we've done is we've received a anticipated administrative fee from the RCMP within our contract. So as a separate billing, we see that every quarter now, and that's included in the financial plan for administration. So we've caught up. They have an annual administration fee that's locked in with our contract moving forward, but identified separately.
Okay.
And that's the same with the severance liability that was incurred. We also receive a separate invoice for that every quarter, and with that, that would go on until 2032.
And wage increases, I guess it's all built in there too, right?
Yes, and what we see in here is the actual cost based on the anticipated increase in wages for the RCMP. But we also have any surplus that's realized every year, and we do put that into our emergency reserve. So, you know, as that length of time goes on, because the RCMP has not had a contract since 2016, so January 1st of 2017, that liability has been incurring, and we have to save that within our emergency reserve for a payout in the future for that contract cost.
Okay, that's good. And the second question is the commissioner services. We didn't have commissioners during COVID time, so the budget is still the same amount, 25,000. I noticed in the 2020 budget. So did that change, or what happened?
Yes, so we didn't have that service provided for most of 2020. What we are looking at now is the possibility of a change in how we provide that service, but keeping that in the financial plan to allow us to still provide the service, and just taking a relook at what services needed for bylaw as far as that parking enforcement or other means as far as what the commissioners provided in the past.
Okay, so the 25,000 for 2020, we used some of that, obviously, or did we use that?
I will have the actuals, but I think very little was used, if any, just off the top of my head when I'm trying to look back. But that would just make up part of the surplus moving forward as far as unspent funds for the commissioners in 2020.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions from council so far? Okay, seeing none.
Just to highlight the strategic priorities for council, and you'll note here that the community policing, obviously with our new building that was purchased, we do have some capital funding that is required to do the renovations on that facility, but we do continue to see the community policing costs drop, because with ownership of a building, the anticipated cost to site that function is lower, and I believe we discussed the impact would be after a 5-year period. It would be a net payback for ownership of that facility based on us owning it rather than having a lease payment. And the commissioners, as mentioned, very little was spent, but we will come back to council with possible options as far as how we will utilize that function and what we need to do moving forward. So. And then we discussed the cost of prisoners and whatnot in the revenue side. With that, I did mention that there was a reduction in the amount of expenses from that prisoner recovery costs that we usually incur. So those are an offset that would be within this line item here, bunched together. Moving forward to the fire protection and service, the increase in the fire protection administration is due to the earth costs going up in 2021. So that's the bulk of the increase in that line item. Regular increases year over year based on the contract are also included in the fire crew, and the repair and maintenance went up, and that was again the earth payment that was reviewed with council back in August of 2020 with the pumper number 1. So this increases the amount that we are incurring for our earth contribution annually based on the realized cost for that pumper 1 that will be delivered in 2021. When it comes to the transportation services, missed the building inspection. It's very consistent year over year. This reflects just the cost of providing building inspection and our SPCA contract with small increases year over year, but very minimal. Transportation services and public works and everything involved, there's quite a few moving parts, and what we'll see year to year is maybe expenditures increase in one area and decrease in another, but overall the financial plan reflects the delivery of service. And sometimes we have reactionary needs that we need to undertake, and where we saw some consistent increases in costs, we have increased those amounts within the financial plan. And street sweeping was one that we saw consistently increase year over year, and that was consistent, so that has been increased. But for the most part, the other line items are consistent year over year. So here again is the off-street parking. I mentioned that that's a revenue item that we receive, so it's just something that we incur, and then we receive a recovery through taxation. So moving into the public transit, obviously with the amended AOA that we have with BC Transit, the costs that we incurred are lowered because of relief on our lease payments, utilization of our reserve funds to bring this down, and we see that over the next 3 years in our annual operating agreement, but then we return back to normal levels as far as cost for public transit. And in projections that BC Transit has, they've lowered the expected revenue that we'd receive in the next 3 years, while we see ridership kind of come back to what we'd see as normal levels. So next up, as mentioned earlier, when we talked about the revenue, the solid waste collection for the city of Alberni will now have a 3-stream collection. Obviously with this, there are increased costs, but it is an increased level of service. And we've worked with the ACRD over the past few months, identifying what the cost to provide service is. They've been very supportive, and they are providing us with both recycling and organic carts at no charge through a grant that they received, and that's over $1 million worth of carts that we've received. And we are hopeful that we can still continue to provide the service with the equipment that we have. We have provided some contingency as far as possible increase in wear and tear and equipment needs in the line items. So as we realize the costs for this service and the changes that we are making, we will bring forward any information to council, but also would be reflected in the utility fees that are charged. So when we look across the island, I think we would still be one of the lowest solid waste costs across the island. Coming from the Comox Valley, I know that the town of Comox was around $225 per year for solid waste collection for all 3 streams, the same that we're providing. Cumberland was close to that too, around $200. We also saw Campbell River at around $210, and Courtney, I think, was the lowest of the group, but they were anticipating an increase with the organic services. So once again, $180 is in line with probably Nanaimo as the lowest cost for solid waste service on the island.
Thank you. It's really helpful to have that context, especially when we are looking at a new service and increasing costs. It's always good to know how we compare. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, so with the added cost of waste disposal now, is there a benefit in the long run, or is this really just to satisfy our desires for a better environment?
Well, it's probably threefold. It does satisfy the environment, obviously. It does provide an extended life of our landfill. It's anticipated that we'd see a 35-year increase if we can get the organic content out. And the city of Port Alberni obviously is the largest provider of waste to the landfill. And with that, we also avoid costs of landfill gas handling. So there's a threshold that we were very close to at the Alberni landfill. if we didn't continue to reduce the levels of organic material going into the landfill, they would need gas collection infrastructure installed. And not only does that cost about $13 million to install that gas collection system over the years, but there's annual operating costs that are incurred that you need to look at. So this is the lowest.
That's great.
cost.
Very well said then.
Yeah, this is the lowest cost option as far as all the options we looked at for solid waste services in the long run, and provides us with an asset that will last 35 additional years.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Andrew, the $180 charge per household, is that projected to cover the total cost of our waste collection?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So we looked at the cost of the earth included in that. So replacing the carts, replacing our trucks, and covers all the costs of the tipping fees. And obviously we have to finalize those costs, but we feel comfortable at the $180. It covers all the costs moving forward, and we'll definitely provide an update as we see those costs being incurred.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point? Okay, back to you, Andrew.
Thank you. So moving on to planning and administration. This is another strategic priority of council. So we've seen additional resources added to the department to provide the support that we need to the development services that we are seeing in the community. So it's a good news story there. And we also look at the OCP updates. There's a plan to undertake that in 2021 with carry forward the amounts that weren't incurred in 2020. So I think there's a small amount that was expended early in the year, but we will probably have a budget of about $150,000 for the OCP update. Moving on to business development, economic development. Obviously, once again, there is expenditures that are decreasing, and this was due to the food hub. That's grant funding. So obviously with economic development, it's all dependent on what's being incurred as far as grant, and that filters through that line item. The security lighting incentive program, so the ESIP program, continues with additional $25,000 to be incurred in 2021. We would like to refine some of the program, make it easier for both the public and staff as far as enrolling that program. So we'll work on that, and then that will continue in 2021. Now moving on to Parks and Rec, and once again, COVID impacts in 2020 continue through 2021. We did look at the anticipated expenses that we'll see operation of facilities. So we're trying to rely on what we saw in 2020, but obviously depending on where things head, these expenses may be higher or lower depending on what public health orders are set. So with that, as we look at the financial plan for Parks and Rec, there has been some reductions in expenses, understanding that if there is expenditures that need to be incurred, we'd have to look at using the COVID funds to bridge that gap. But we have to be fiscally responsible, as the Director of Parks and Rec mentioned at our last meeting, and try to balance between providing the services that we need and the funding that we have available to undertake those services.
Councillor Solda, did you have a question?
Do on the Glenwood concession, is that a typo, or is that, I just never seen that in a budget, DIV/0 exclamation 27124 line.
Yeah, so what that is just noting a calculation. So you can change that to be blank if there isn't anything in the fund, but it's trying to divide zero, right?
Okay,
so.
I just never seen that. I was just curious. Thank you about that.
Okay.
So moving down to parks and playgrounds, with the parks maintenance, we do have the additional labor that was planned, and then the funding to ensure the planting of trees when we have the opportunity to. So that was the funding for the parks labor and the trees in this strategic priority here, and that is realized in the 2021 year. When it comes to our museum services, obviously we aren't open as we normally are. So things are fairly consistent, but there are some changes, and with industrial collections, that was really just an increase in utility expenses as far as that line item. So that is reflective of the utility expenses that we've incurred, and that's why you'll see that 16.6%. And then Mclean mill operations, we also have some contingency in there, some of the operation costs that we incur for our portion of the operation of the site in the historic site. So there's utility costs. We also have a well monitoring program that we have to undertake in the next 2 years to deal with the spill and ensure that is in there, and then it moves back down to 60,000 moving forward for the expenses that we incur at the site for operations. And then the contract with
from Councillor Washington.
Sorry to interrupt that, Andrew, but the money that we got from the federal government to run the Mclean mill initially, that's all been got and spent, and there's no more federal money coming yearly for that, is there?
Madam Mayor, that's a good question, because when we get down to capital, I can address that. But there is funding that we apply for every year, and it's a grant contribution for the historical component of the properties. So, and that's in combination with the Alberni Clay Plot Regional District contribution.
Thank you, and Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Andrew, under industrial collections, is that where the Industrial Heritage Society would fall under?
I believe that is, yes. That's a component of some of the expenditures that we incur for that collection. Yeah.
Thank you. And Andrew, are you able to just summarize again what that 70,000 is for Mclean mill operations? Okay.
Certainly. So what this is it's the expenditures that we incur. There's fuel, there's oils, as far as heating, there's electricity, and all the work that we do out there. That's for that component. There's also the possible contingencies that we have as far as outstanding amounts that would be coming from that for Mclean's mill, should we need that. And then there's the well monitoring, around $10,000 per year, and then returning back down to $60,000 after 2 years of monitoring the well, after we confirm that there's no contaminants.
Okay, I'm surprised to see that one specifically increase because, and I might be mixing up lines here, but the 40,000, I believe last year, the intent was, around Mclean mill and the transition of the society to the chamber operating and just having some unknowns around if there were deposits or events booked that, they would need to return funds for. So I had envisioned that 40,000 as being more of a one-time cost to the city. And I know that the chamber has said that they only needed, I think, around 15,000 of it. So I'm surprised to see that jumping so much. I'm wondering if it's possible I'm mixing up lines and that contingency was elsewhere. Or maybe we budgeted elsewhere last year for our maintenance and costs. I'm not sure if you're able to clarify on that at all today, or if we could get more information on that cost for our next meeting.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, I can provide you with the information, you and council, the information through our Q&A or within the next staff report to address that line item in detail.
Great, either of those would be fine. Councillor Solda.
It's interesting because when the Chamber of Commerce gave a presentation last time, they were under budget in regarding that contingency fund for the weddings and that. So I'm just kind of curious to know too, more information on that particular line item, Andrew. And you're going to supply that next time, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, not seeing any other questions at this point.
Okay. And then that wraps up the expenses that we have within the financial plan. So the remainder is transfers to reserves for capital projects, and also our contingency for COVID. So that includes $200,000 that we budget year to year, along with the COVID funds that we would be bringing in as we need to continue to operate the facilities and the programs that we provide the city residents. So moving on to capital plan, or sorry, I'll quickly go over the sewer and water financial plans. So within the financial plan for 2021, there's a 3.79% increase for our sewer fees. We've done long-term planning as far as the sewer and water through our software that we've had a consultant support us for the last 8 or 9 years, and that provides us with the long-term planning for both water and sewer fees. Expenditures are fairly consistent year over year. Once we do see the new lagoon come into play, we do anticipate increased costs in electricity. So we do need to refine that in the financial plan, and we will be bringing those amounts in and as we see those anticipated as far as increased costs. So, but other than that, the overall sewer fund and sewer works, they are very consistent year over year as far as expenditures. When it comes to the water, once again, the revenues plan based on projections over a long term. These are obviously expenditures that are incurred for just the water service and have a separate fund segregated from both the general fund and the sewer fund. So every dollar that we have in revenue stays within the water fund. So moving on to the capital plan.
Sorry, I've got a question from Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Andrew, what was that line? Supply inspection and operation went up by 87%. Yeah, 64141.
So historically, there's been a, sorry, I missed that. Historically, there's been $100,000 in the financial plan every year in capital for inspections, but essentially that's an operating expense. That's not a capital expense. So those will no longer be in the capital plan. Those moved into the operating plan.
So what does that mean?
Well, sorry if I wasn't clear, Councillor Corbeil. So what this is just transferring out of a capital expenditure into an operational expenditure, because we wouldn't capitalize inspection of our pipes.
So you're telling me there's no increase, it's just a different form of accounting for it then, is that correct?
Yeah, it's moving it from our capital plan, still within the same fund. It's still an expenditure that's still in there, but no longer in the capital plan moving forward.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. So bear with me here and try to line it up so we can see it. is everyone still able to see the financial plan as I pulled it out here? Or?
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay. All right. So when it comes to our capital plan in 2021, the large project and the strategic priority of council was the Connect the Keys pathway. And we do have grant funding application in for this. That's at $2.5 million. And I did mention earlier that we brought down the financial plan tax increase year over year from 10.2% to 3.95%. And originally in the 2020 plan, there was $1.1 million in tax requisition for this project. So that was shifted from taxation to our general reserve fund as far as the funding source. And then we continued on with the gas tax that was allocated with it because we have the $2.5 million for the total project. We can still use these gas tax funds as long as we don't hit a threshold of, I believe it's 83% of federal funding for this project. And then we pulled in the capital reserve and the carbon fund to provide the $1.5 million of funding for the project and the $2.5 million in our grant application for a total of $4 million in 2021. And this project goes on through years 2022 and 2023. When it comes to the other strategic priority within the financial plan, the community policing building, the purchase of the building has been incurred and there's some renovation funding that's required and the architectural design. So this will be included in the financial plan. And once again, this is coming from our emergency reserve fund for funding. The annual computer replacement program, that's a consistent amount that we renew our assets year over year, and information systems continues to do that. And that's an annual amount that increases with inflation every year. A new item that was included is the asset management implementation. Obviously, we've had the funding for our grant that was received, and that was $550,000 to get the asset management plan in place, but we do need some funding to support implementation. Currently, we have that work being done by staff, and it's kind of off the side of staff's desk. So we're looking at options as far as the $60,000 in contract costs to support getting that implemented in 2021, and that would be coming from the gas tax fund. When it comes, if there's any questions, please feel free to ask. When it comes to printer renewal, citywide, what happened in 2012 was a consolidation of printers at the city, looking at the costs incurred for printers in 2012 and going to a more centralized printing resource for each facility. That was identified and actually was a cost savings in 2012, but the IRF contribution for printers wasn't in place. So when it came up for renewal, these printers are at the end of the life and need to be replaced, and it wasn't included in the financial plan for 2020. So we've delayed that, and some have failed, and we've had to replace a few, but we do need to replace most of this printers citywide. And a lot of the printers, they're not making replacement parts for, so we've identified this, and it will be in the IRF moving forward. So, Madam Mayor, I believe Councillor Solda had a...
It's okay, you answered the end question, my question in the end. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final item in the administrative capital components is the EPR. So that's our accounting software. In 2022, there was a renewal or an upgrade that was identified for $500,000, and that has been delayed. We feel that we can do some process improvements to support staff to streamline some processes and still utilize our software, understanding that our software is coming to its end of life, and we do need to start planning for that, but we've pushed that out until the end of the 2021-2025 financial plan. So we're spending the $30,000, and avoiding the $500,000 cost until later in this financial plan. When it comes to the fire department, we actually just this morning, I'm going to ask council to defer this item until 2022. So within the staff report that's coming to council at our next regular council meeting, we'll be shifting this from 2021 to 2022. The tools also have been in the financial plan for years here, and in 2021 they're being expended, and they are coming from taxation completely. So that will be in the financial plan for this capital year. And then in August of 2020, council received a report from Chief Owens, and it was supportive as far as the advance approval of the pumper one replacement, and this reflects the contract that we have for that replacement. And then there's the fire structure prep for the replacement of truck 2. This remains in the financial plan, and you know, Chief Owens will look at what's required as we get closer to the replacement of that of ladder truck 2. So this is in with the gas tax. It's not from taxation, but it's a gas tax project. When it comes to our IRF and our transportation replacement, these are all items that either have been in the financial plan and have been shifted backwards, and most of them have been shifted from prior years into this year. And every year, the maintenance staff review every piece of equipment to ensure that they still have life and there's still a benefit to the city to continue to use that asset. So with that, these are the vehicles that need to be replaced and have been identified. Noting that the replacement for dump box 241 that was added, further investigation resulted in a repair, and we can repair this unit. So I would ask council to remove this in the next staff report, and we will just have an operational cost for the repair of that dump box. So when it comes to our road construction, sewer, storm, and water projects that are combined, the 6th Avenue Melrose to Bruce is the final leg of that 6th Avenue from Argyle to Bruce. And this is planned and has been in the financial plan for a while. It's taking funding from gas tax and some of our MFA surplus that we've had from prior borrowing. And then of course there's the water and sewer components. And then we move on to Coal Creek. And with Coal Creek, this project is the final phase of Coal Creek and the combined sewer overflow separation program. So very important project, and we did have a project in 2020 that was not acted upon due to a few different impacts in 2020, obviously COVID and some staffing changes, but there is a benefit of combining these two projects from 2020 and 2021 into a consolidated tender. And with that, so we would anticipate better quotes coming in for the larger project. With that, we do want to take advantage of the options for those bidders out there, and having that early adoption and allowing staff to move forward with the tender prior to the adoption of the financial plan will be brought forward at our next council meeting to ask for that early approval. So that would combine both what was budgeted in 2020 and the 2021 year for this final phase of Coal Creek. With the rail crossings, we do have some damage to rail crossings at both Strathern and Dunbar. These need to be repaired. With that, they need to be repaired to a standard and that meets today's regulations for rail crossings. So there is $100,000 from taxation and $50,000 from our gas tax fund to support that improvement on those two rail crossings that we have. when it comes to the Redford,
Got a question from Councillor Washington.
Sorry, Andrew. The rail crossings, that's just for tire traffic to go over. It's nothing to do with the actual rail train on the tracks. It's the actual the street part of it.
well, good question. It was, it's both the street crossing and for rail crossing. So we do need to ensure that the rail crossings meet a standard for train traffic. So in order for trains to go across those two sections, these repairs need to be upgraded to today's standards for train.
Thank you. And Councillor Corbeil?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just trying to picture where these are. Strathard and Dunbar, I think, parallel each other. Are we talking that one crossing by the entrance to the Somas Mill, Andrew?
I'm going to defer to CAO apply on this one, if that's okay. I think I know where it is, but I think he has a better understanding of where these two crossings are.
Well, you're testing my knowledge now. I understand Dunbar to be the main entrance to the Somas Mill, as Councillor Corbeil has mentioned, and the Strathern crossing is in front of the food hub, formerly the fish plant.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil, does that answer your question?
I believe it does.
Thank you.
All right. So moving on to some road and construction, our final project in 2021. Getting used to saying 2021. With the Redford looping and signal improvements, the associated repairs for that will include some road paving, but at that same time, we will be doing some let-down improvements at that intersection. So that's a $35,000 improvement to the paving in that intersection. And then, of course, the Redford looping and signals, that is an additional $20,000. So that combined project is $55,000 for 2021. Signal controller, we're doing a replacement or a annual replacement of these signal traffic controllers throughout the city. And with that, where we do have the opportunity to not do a full scale replacement, we will see a reduced cost just to do the change out of the controls, where we don't need to have a total box replacement. So some years into the future, you'll see this price drop. So.
Thank you. Councillor Poon, did you have a question?
Yeah, just wondering, these signal controllers, is that like for pushing the button for like pedestrians, or is that different?
Well, it's the signals, the combined buttons and the lights, and just with the waiting at those intersections. It's just
Okay.
those controls.
I'm just wondering, because are we upgrading to touchless crosswalks or things like that, or something where we don't have to touch?
Not to my knowledge. I don't believe that's. It's replacing what is currently there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Solda?
Yeah, on the high traffic areas, the ones that we're changing the signals and doing some upgrading, is there enough time for seniors for crossing, people that have disabilities? I know in the past we had some issues with the senior homes when the seniors were trying to cross and they couldn't get across fast enough. So will they check that out, or have they heard anything that there's some issues regarding that now, presently?
So, Madam Mayor, I'm not aware of that. I would probably ask Public Works to provide that information as a follow-up, but at this time we can take that back and provide an answer as far as timing.
we should keep that in mind because, I mean, we know there's seniors walking and it's hard sometimes to get across the street, and it would be really great to have a little more time for them.
And
thank you.
you're welcome. And I think we do see that at the Wallace crossing. It is quite a lengthy crosswalk section. So that's my awareness as far as giving time to those that need it. And I'm sure that I can follow up with Public Works and provide an answer to.
Well, Redford and 10th is a pretty busy intersection, and there is a seniors in that area, a lot of seniors. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions.
Okay. And then moving on to storm. So with the storm replacements, we put an annual amount in the financial plan for small capital, small items that we might see as far as projects that aren't anticipated, but they're just small projects that when we lift up a manhole, we see that there is a need to go and do some further work. So this allows us to continue with those small projects. So we usually put $100,000 every year in the capital fund for that. Next up is the Margaret Street storm pump and upgrades. What this is here is the Kitsupsis dike, and any storm events, this pumps into the creek. So these pumps are approximately 50 years old, so the original ones, and they're at the end of their life. And this is a replacement of those pumps, and I think it will be an improvement. Newer pumps are more efficient, and they're not as loud, so the public might notice a difference in that area as far as noise when these are replaced. And then the new mains, so this is part of the Coal Creek project, another $400,000 for the section from Melrose to 8th to 11th. So once again, the final stage of our combined sewer outflow separation program. Moving into.
Before we move.
Okay.
Madam Mayor. Okay.
Sorry, I was muted. Go ahead, Councillor Solak.
It's fine. Before we go into other, just to stay back into the works here, sidewalks. We have many sidewalks in the community that really need some upgrading. Is that just in another department, in a general, or is there anything for sidewalks to be upgraded?
Yeah, so annually, that's a good question. I wanted to try to find it here. We do have money in the Public Works section of the financial plan for that, for that amount. It's hard to see on this little screen here, but
yeah,
I can confirm that in a follow-up.
Okay. It's just that we've had some issues before, and I just would like to see some sidewalks get replaced. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Solda. And I believe the money that's been added in is due to the concerns that we've had coming forward. So always appreciate the people who do point out specific sections that do need improvements.
So moving to City Hall, other in capital. So this was an identified project to include the windows at the City Hall, and we anticipate this to cost $80,000, and that would be coming from a carbon reserve. With that, we see some efficiencies as far as heating and cooling in the different seasons if these are replaced. They are fairly old windows, and many have lost their seal. The RCMP storage requirements, this was originally $50,000, and that was reviewed at the last council meeting. This has been reduced down to $27,000, and that is $20,000 for that storage, $27,000, $20,000 for the storage, and $7,000 for the ident area that will be provided at RCMP headquarters there. And then the other project was the City Hall survey GPS, and this was addressed in the Q&A that we had for council in the attachment. And then at our last council meeting, there was a funding support for parks, and that is to support the work that needs to be done prior to the possible grant that we submitted for at the linking the Roger Creek Trail. So this is currently at $25,000 as approved by council. Moving into the cultural services and the Mclean's Mill septic upgrades. This was a project that was identified, I think, prior to my arrival here, and there's some septic upgrades by a consultant that was identified. So we've included that in the financial plan. Previously, these were all lumped together, and council's request was to separate them out to have more detail. Also with Mclean's Mill, there's the underground storage tanks that are identified, and that project is approximately $30,000 to address those. When it comes to Mclean Mill capital projects, and the question was asked earlier, just about the heritage component. So we do see a $30,000 contribution to the historical component of the site. The Alberni Claypot Regional District will also provide a $30,000 annual historical grant contribution. And then we apply for an annual grant through Parks Canada to support those historical sites also. And then within Parks and Rec and Heritage, we do have annual maintenance that's undertaken at the Aquatic Center. Originally in last year's plan, this was at 100,000. Now it's at 25,000 based on the projects that have been refined. This is coming from our gas tax funding. Echo Fieldhouse has been on a replacement as far as the furnaces. This is number 3 and the final one, and this is another $7,000 for that furnace replacement. The facility upgrades, these are all the facilities throughout the city as far as Parks and Rec and Heritage, and includes a lot of small capital items. These have been refined. This was 250,000, and staff have brought back the required items, and that's at 140 now. There's a dehumidifier at the multiplex that needs replacement. That is in there for $44,000. We recently approved the award for the multiplex lighting. We had some very favorable costs come back as far as that, and we'll need to refine that number there as far as cost and scope, the cost, sorry, for that. And I think we did receive a grant also from BC Hydro for that, so that did bring down the cost also. And then the multiplex lighting, or multiplex screen, that's in there for $250. Originally, we had that in there for $300, but right now, staff have brought forward the $250, and that's coming from our Parks and Rec reserve. And then the floor scrubber, of course, that's coming from IRF, and that's replaced at $14,000. So.
Councillor Haggard, and then Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now, I just want to clarify the multiplex screen that will be repaid by the Bulldogs organization over a period of time. Is that the agreement that we've made?
Well, Madam Mayor, I think the intent is to ensure that there is recovery of that, and then that is replaced through the IRF. So revenue would be received for that expenditure moving forward, and that's the anticipation for that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could just confirm that we have not really committed to moving forward with that project yet. We were just looking to narrow down the budget figure because there was quite a bit of variation. We weren't really sure what it was going to cost yet. So is this just in here as a placeholder at this point?
That is correct. That's based on that. And of course, council has to make that approval to go forward with that. And the Director of Parks, Rec and Heritage will be bringing forward a report in the future should that be required. So.
Thank you. Councillor Solda?
Oh, good. I'm glad you said that because I thought, when did I didn't vote on this one prior. Is lighting spelt wrong? I mean, there's several spelling mistakes throughout this, but is that a name or is that supposed to be lighting? Multiplex lighting and multiplex lighting screen?
Yes, that's supposed to be lighting, correct.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
I'll check.
Okay. So we will be looking at Madam Mayor, the screen in a separate item after, right?
Yes, thank you. We will.
Thank you.
Councillor Corbeil?
Just one more screen question. And I believe we asked for a request for proposals on what the cost of the screen would be. Do you know if we've received those, Andrew?
At this time, Councillor Corbeil, I'm not aware of any specifics, and I would get that confirmation from the Director of Parks and Rec and Heritage, and we can bring that back and confirm that next week.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And then now we are looking at, sorry, here. I'm just gonna have to move around a little bit to follow the, that ends our capital works for the general capital. And moving on to the Waterworks, once again, dead end and distribution upgrades. We'll probably change the description of this one. This is that small capital that's incurred, those small projects that we need to undertake every year. So we usually keep $100,000 in that line item, and this comes from our reserve account in the water fund. The 6th Avenue to Argyle Angus Streets, this is just a continuation, and there's another $150,000 in the financial plan to do those upgrades. And once again, everything that we see in this section comes from the utility fees and stays within expenditures within that fund. The large project, which is another project that we will be bringing forward for early approval. Once again, it makes sense for us to go out when the bidders are trying to fill up their order sheet early in the year. So we'd like to bring forward early approval of the Cowichan Reservoir, the Twin Main, obviously phase 5. There's some advantages of this, and this is just part of our long-term program to do the continuation of the trunk main project that includes another 820 meters of pipe, and this will go along 15th Avenue between Montrose and Folly Crescent. So this will optimize the system, reducing some annual costs that we incur, reduces risks and resiliency within our system, and through a dedicated trunk main and distribution system. So once again, at the next council meeting, we would like to ask council to consider early adoption of this project. And then moving on to the next item, this is a component of Melrose and Bruce that we mentioned earlier, and this is another $100,000 for this project in 2021. Then we move on to the bird component here, and really these two projects are linked and will probably be RFP together for $350,000, and that's just to improve the pipe and to put a regulator and replacement in there. So, and then of course we've been ongoing with updates to our water meter program, and this past year we've seen a higher increase in the meter changeover. Obviously, meters have a lifetime, and they start to lower their registering of water as they age. So usually to the benefit of the owner. So as we change these out, we're getting more reflective revenue of the water that's being used at each property. And then there's the small main replacements when we move into sewer. Once again, just a placeholder for possible projects that we use throughout the year or adding on to projects. That's $100,000 that we keep in there. And then we're looking at having a new sewer crawler that will help us inspect the pipe and go to more preventative maintenance and staff have brought forward a project or a new piece of equipment within the sewer fund, and that the best option was an $80,000 unit that would provide us with information to help support moving forward with projects as needed within our system. And that wraps up the 2021 capital projects. And,
Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam. Andrew, can we get from the Director of Engineering, not tonight, but just how many combined storm and sewer pipes we still have to get rid of, so we can separate the storm and the sewer, so that the storm water doesn't have to be processed at our new facility? Just like I say, just sometime, not tonight.
yeah, that might take some time to new director, but we'll have that on the list. I do know that was part of the information that we need to bring forward to council, just so that we have a long-term plan, even within our asset management program.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Andrew, along the same lines as Councillor Washington's question, would it be possible at a future date to see a plan for roads? I mean, a constant criticism of taxpayers are potholes in the shape of some roads. And I appreciate that you don't go digging up a road if you're going to replace a water main in the next couple of years. But there's some areas, from Wallace to, I think it's Exton, it's like a mogul field. And I'd be curious to know if, in a couple of years down the road, the sewer lines have to be replaced. Therefore, that's when we will do something about the pavement.
Good question. Yeah, both good questions. Just having that long-term plan, it's really supportive of making sure that we replace the infrastructure on the ground at the same time we're replacing roads. So that is something that we do talk about consistently here, is making sure that we don't do projects one at a time. We do combine them whenever they make sense. So.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions from council at this point? Okay, seeing none.
One thing that I noted here, and I should have brought this up in the expenditure section, is that the new director of engineering has been looking at a study as far as crossings in the city, and he's seeking some additional funding, and that's $20,000 in 2020. We're looking at providing this funding to undertake a study with ICBC and ensuring that it doesn't increase the taxation. So we'd be looking at our reserves or our prior surplus to fund this project in 2021.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, just a question for Andrew regarding non-existing crosswalks and that because there's some safety issues. Will they be looking at that too?
Madam Mayor, I think that question will be best answered by the Director of Engineering, and we will follow up with that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I think that is all I had for the expenditures, the revenue, and of course the capital plan. So moving on to the next section, I'm just going to bring up another screen that addresses non-market change. Okay. All right, so can everyone see the new screen share? So one thing that I'd like to address, and it's a good news story, as mentioned earlier. We've seen increases in our non-market change within our assessment role. So, of course, the completed role is the role that we receive at the start of January, and there is an option for appeals through the end of the month. January, and then we would have the revised roll usually in March. So that will confirm these numbers. So these are just preliminary, but we can use them to get a sense of our non-market change. So currently, within all classes within the city, we are looking at a 1.59% non-market change value. That equates to about a $41.7 million increase in properties that weren't in there in the past. So what non-market change is, and I should go back to that, is that it's that new building that wasn't there in the prior year. So changes in property values that are a result of new construction authorized under local building authority or by permit. Any changes to property classifications, any exemption changes, or any zoning changes that might increase the or decrease the density or use of the property that is zoned. So what happens is we see a residential increase, and right now we have the financial plan that's set at 3.95 as far as an overall tax increase over year. But with the average residential family home, the non-market change will provide a 2.76% increase year over year for that average home in the city of Port Alberni. That's what we have often referenced as our messaging to the public. So that's currently sitting at 2.76%. We did see the light industry, and as our delegation brought forward, this is really just the SAN group and going in from a class 4 and moving into light industry. So we saw an increase in the non-market change in 2020, but we also saw it again in 2021. So as they develop that site and continue to construct the facility, that will be going up, and that was addressed in the delegation as far as a concern from their side as far as the rates and the tax burden on major and light industry. So does that provide more taxes for the city, the non-market change? So no, not how we currently use the non-market change. So our tax rate right now is 3.95% year over year on the gross amount. But because we have that non-market change, it dilutes the impact on the public. So that's why we are coming down to 2.76%. So I just wanted to provide an example, and I hope this supports the understanding that council would have with how non-market change impacts the residential taxpayers and all taxpayers. So, if the city, this is just a basic example. If the city requires $100 of tax to provide services, and then the city requires 103 the next year for a 3.95% increase, and all properties, and we had 10 properties, they're all valued the same at $1,000 of assessed value, each would pay $10 in taxes. And then we look towards the next year, we saw a new property added from a vacant piece of land. That also held a value of $1,000, and now we have 11 properties. Even with a 3.95% increase, the taxes paid by all the properties would be $9.45. So that shows you that dilution. Even though we're increasing, the overall base is providing a lower tax impact in this scenario. And then let's say the city needs $110 of taxes to provide the services. That's a 5.8% increase. And even if the assessed values of those 11 properties doubled, and they all were valued the same, just to do the comparison, each property would pay $10 in taxes. So that's how that works. As we see new market change, that helps carry the burden of our taxes in the city. This is not consistently done throughout the province. It's just the way that the city of Port Alberni has undertaken this. And historically, we haven't had large amounts of non-market change, but in the past few years, we are seeing that occur. And what are other municipalities doing? There's some municipalities that will take that non-market change, ensure that there's an increase of, let's say if it's a 4% increase, the average homeowner would see an increase of 4% still, and they would take that additional revenue and then provide that in possible strategic plans or in a reserve contribution for growth. So there's different alternatives, and we can explore this further with council if council would like to see that incur. So, but now is not the time. But moving forward, if we want to address non-market change in a different way than we currently are, we can provide that options to council to review that. So I hope that's helpful. But if there's any questions?
Yeah, Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question. So is there a better way of doing this for the taxpayers, or I mean, you've dealt with this before, I haven't, so is there a better way?
So, Madam Mayor, I wouldn't say there's a better way. This is just how we provided the opportunity to increase the taxes that we need to provide the services that we provide, but having that diluted over a greater tax base. So just because values go up and our non-market change goes up, we don't increase the taxation based on that 4%, or if there's new properties coming on, we don't tax that at full rate. It's just we provide services and we require the taxation, which provides the tax rates and the impact on the property owners.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Andrew, do you have a, so you said effectively for residential, the current increase is not 3.95, it's down to 2.76 based on the non-market change in the residential class. Do you have non-market change information for the heavy industry and light industrial classes?
Not at this time. I focused on the residential. That's something that we normally focus on, and we haven't seen the increases in the industry or other tax classes. So we could provide that information based on the increase and how that impacts the rates within the class. But currently in the proposed plan, as alluded to by the delegation, the amounts are blocked together for major industry and light industry, but we can definitely provide that non-market change impact as far as dilution. But because we blocked it, it's a little bit different. If we remained it at, in the prior year, we were at 0.55%, and this year it's 1.96% based on that blocking. Yeah, I can definitely bring forward some information to council to consider as far as that non-market change for light industry.
I think it would be prudent for us to see a few different scenarios around, the changes in the light industrial class. I know that there was quite a shift in the class last year, of course, as well. So it might look a little shocking to go from, last year to this year for some taxpayers. I know that it looked as if some of them were doubling, but they were actually just coming back to 2019 levels. So I think it would be good for us to see a bit of context on how some of our light and heavy industrial taxpayers are shifting over the last few years, and look at a couple different scenarios of how they can change over the next few years. I don't think we should just apply non-market change specifically to the class that it was obtained in without giving consideration to spreading it across all classes. I've been a firm believer over time that, as more industry does develop in our community, that the residential taxpayers of this community should see some financial benefit to that. And if we keep the non-market change within each class, or even group 4 and 5 together, residential taxpayers will not see a financial benefit in the form of taxation to when we're seeing increases in those classes. So I think we need to make sure that we have the full picture and not just do things like we've always done over the last few years. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none. Okay. Andrew, is that the end of the information you have for us tonight?
That is, and if council wants to make any changes, we do want to provide second reading at our next council meeting. So if there's any changes to the financial plan, we'd like to have those provided and then provide second reading as amended at the next council meeting. So.
Thank you. That's great. And Twyla, did you have a comment as well?
If I could just ask Andrew to stop screen sharing and I can pull the agenda back up and just have council consider next items on the agenda. Sorry, I have to get my agenda back up here.
I see that there is a suggested recommendation there.
Thank you. Yes, there's two suggestions. So first, if there's any request of members of the committee, you could list specific items to direct those changes to the financial plan. And then there was another suggested motion to address the non-market change, but that might be based on the latest conversation early, and you may not wish to consider that at this particular moment.
Thank you. Council, so yeah, a couple things to consider here. If there are specific changes to the budget that you would like to recommend, of course, we are the committee, so recommend to council. We could bring those forward now. If we want to deal with the residential non-market change today, we certainly can. We also could, wait for more information and move forward then. How does council want to proceed? Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, does that also include the Bulldog screen, or do you want to talk about it now, or do we want to wait?
Maybe we could just, do you have more questions after the information that we've received tonight? Are you wanting an update now?
Well, I don't know if I want to go ahead with it, and that's where I'm at. I would like to, do we want to wait for an update? Do we want to know? I would like more information. I mean, I don't know how much more we can get that we had when the Bulldogs made a presentation and it was presented by staff.
Thank you. Andrew?
So, Madam Mayor, to address Councillor Solda's question, I think this is not a tax impact the way it's currently sitting within the financial plan. It's in our Parks and Rec reserve. Council will have to approve that screen capital improvement. Therefore, if there's a change, that wouldn't be acted on, and that would just remain in the Parks and Rec reserve as far as funding. So we can still proceed with that in there. And then if council decides to make a change based on the RFP, then we can remove that prior to the finalization of the financial plan.
Okay. And one other thing, Madam Mayor, for money like a reserve for a future swimming pool, there is no line item for it. We should be having some kind of a reserve for the pool, and because it's going to come down to it that we're going to need a new pool. And although the regional district's going to kick in, we're hoping, and shouldn't we have some money to be shovel ready type of thing or grant ready? And there is nothing that states that's earmarked pool.
Thank you. Andrew, do you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, what we've had in the past is a commitment to do a study with the ACRD. That work needs to continue. Obviously with COVID, things have been delayed, but it's something that we could use our Parks and Rec reserve. And I think we've allocated money prior to these financial plans that I've been part of to that work. So we can still access that to continue that work. Should council want to amend the financial plan at any time to include that from the Parks and Rec reserve, because that is a non-taxation impact.
But Madam Mayor, the only reason I'm questioning that is, yes, we have a Parks and Rec reserve, but if we keep using it for other things to like repairs and that, it goes down. So there's nothing earmarked new pool, and that's what I have concerns about.
Thanks, Councillor Solda. I think that's a great point. And I do think, just for clarity, that we have not been using that Parks and Rec reserve. I think it's been, for the most part, money going in rather than money coming out in prior years. I think what's kind of started this conversation is that the Parks and Rec reserve was requested to be used for the big screen. yeah, and we obviously have more conversation to have around that. But I don't think that there's been a practice of drawing a lot of funds out of that reserve. In fact, a few years ago, we added a few $100,000 to it, I believe, intending to use it for a new pool at some point.
Well, and that was my understanding in the years past for me too, that that reserve was for capital projects, and the pool, we wanted to be shovel ready for any grants that came through. And that's why this study was done years back in my days, let's put it that way.
Thanks.
So,
And I will just add that I did reach out to Chair John Jack of the Regional District today. You know, as people in the community are aware, we are having conversations with the Regional District about building a pool. I think that what we have a consensus on in the community is that we want a new pool, absolutely. I don't think that council needs to be convinced of, you know, the desire in the community for a new pool. The question is, how do we fund it and who will pay for it? So we are having conversations with the Regional District. I did reach out to Chair Jack today to add the pool as an agenda item on our next Regional District agenda so that we could have an update on where we got to prior to COVID. Of course, COVID derailed the conversations we were having, but what the next steps are. So I know that there's, you know, a commitment to a report, and we have been talking about timelines in those conversations as well. So, you know, myself and Councillor Paulson will be a part of those conversations and commit to bringing an update back to council.
fair enough. I'll leave it till then. I'm looking forward to it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson?
Yeah, just to go a little further on that, I think the conversation, Madam Mayor, is true that we need to restart that conversation within the regional district. The funding for a pool certainly will be more convoluted than a reserve fund. The reserve fund will not fund a pool, so there will be borrowing involved. There will be consideration given to how many, if not all, of the regional district will be involved to offset the cost. And I think the other big conversation that's going to go on around that is not just the capital cost of building the pool, but is the ongoing cost of running the pool. But that's for another time. I don't know. We will probably get local funding. I'm thinking of maybe the community forest might be able to support funding in some ways. Who knows? But it's a bigger conversation, and that $2 million Parks and Rec fund, certainly portions of it could be used, but it's not going to be the answer.
Totally.
Yeah, and we probably aren't going to see the level of grants that we expected at one point as well, because I know, you know, traditionally we've been talking about a $30 million pool where 50% of it is paid by other levels of government. And I certainly haven't seen any $15 million grant opportunities for communities our size for pools in the time I've been on council, and it's unlikely that will come. So our whole conversation around a pool, in my opinion, needs to shift. Again, like I said, I think what we do know is that it's a priority, but there's work that needs to be done to make sure that when we get that pool built, it's affordable for us long-term and it's equitably paid for across all residents of the Alberni Valley. You know, it shouldn't, and maybe I'm grandstanding here, but it shouldn't matter if you live on, you know, one side of Pierce Road or the other. We should all pay equally into the pool. So I think we need to be cautious as a municipality to not rush in and end up paying 100% of the costs with, you know, 55% of the residents of this valley. It's just not reasonable for us to push forward and end up taking on that whole debt. It's going to be a significant cost, and we need to make sure that it is paid for fairly and equitably across everyone in the Alberni Valley.
Totally agree.
Okay, so council, I'm not seeing any suggestions for change today. Oh, Councillor Haggard, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't want to change the subject. I was trying to wait till you finish the pool conversation. At the last meeting, when we talked about our budget, I asked about if there's anything planned for the painting of the Harbor Key buildings. And I know we've painted other city buildings in the last couple of years, And I think they were in much better condition than the Harbor Key buildings were. So I think they're in desperate need of painting. And it does say in the comments, Andrew, that you're exploring an iced tea to help fund this project. But if we can't get funding from iced tea, we should maybe need to look at putting it in our 5-year plan to get it done, because I think they really need to be painted desperately. So maybe that's something that we could look at as well. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Councillor Haggard. Andrew, go ahead.
So just to clarify for the question or the comment from Councillor Haggard, just put it within the 5-year plan. We can look at getting some quotes from contractors in order to get a sense of what that is, and then look into 2022 and forward as far as that's what your intent is.
Thank you, Councillor Paulson, and then Councillor Corbeil.
I hate to beat a dead horse here, but I've mentioned this before in years previous that I think it's absolutely fabulous that we have an IRF fund for our rolling stock, our equipment, but we don't have a fund in our city coffers that is like an IRF fund for the ongoing maintenance of our buildings. And you know, that could be as much as replacing a roof at Roland Arts Center or something like that. There is no money for that. And those are expenses that come up and we kind of go, whoops, what happened? And I would just like to see some thoughts moving forward that we're actually putting some building fund IRF into place over time. I don't know how the formula would work, gang, but it just seems like painting of the Harbor Key, we shouldn't even be having that discussion because it should just be done. And, you know, if we had the money to do that in kind of a little piggy bank type thing moving forward, would be great.
Thank you. Andrew, if you'd like to talk about asset management.
Absolutely. Read my mind. No, that is asset management to a T. You know, whether it's the pool that was built in '67, effectively you should be putting money away every single year you operate that facility, and that's the push for asset management moving forward. We need to have a good understanding not only the capital costs but the operational costs. So asset management, you know, the capital cost might be 20% of the total cost, lifetime cost of that asset, but you have 80% of operational costs that you need to cover for that lifetime. So I think there's a lot of information that we need to bring forward to council to give you a good idea of all the assets we own and a strong understanding of what it's going to take to fund these assets moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think council will welcome that information. And I think we also shouldn't forget as a city about the places where we have, or the kind of sections of our city where we have done asset management really well. The IRF fund is a great example of a success. You know, we have savings, we know what our anticipated costs are, and typically we fund replacements out of that. But another example is our sewer and water fees. And while it's been challenging to get onto a path where, you know, we are seeing sustainable infrastructure renewal, because that has come with increases, unfortunately, it's based on a plan. We know what, you know, we know what needs to be replaced. We know what our costs are going to be. We know what the maintenance is, and we're increasing fees in order to make sure that we're not putting off work that needs to be done, but we're taking care of our assets responsibly. So I think we often talk about these things as negatives, you know, because it's difficult to increase fees, but we need to celebrate where we're doing asset management well, and sewer and water and IRF are great examples of work that's been done before us that was done very well.
Councillor Haggard, I have a couple of paintbrushes in my basement. You and I can get busy.
I'm in.
Me too. I'll join that in lieu of a capital plan for painting. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, kind of along the same lines, I believe there's somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 budgeted for maintenance. Maybe that needs to be reviewed. And part of maintenance, at least in my mind, is keeping the paint up. And if they just annually do a little bit, in no time flat, it'll look a heck of a lot better than it does today. So, maybe the maintenance budget's not where it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. Did I miss other people's hands? Okay, not seeing anything else. Well, council, I just want to say that I think that staff has done a great job preparing this budget to date. Normally we go through and we make so many changes to budgets, so many, small projects that we take out or add in. And I think that this budget is very close to where we want to see it. And, if we were to apply the non-market change today, to end up with a increase of 2.75, then I think we would be, in a pretty good place. I do think that we have more work and understanding to get to before we make decisions on non-market change, and just make sure that, we all have a full understanding of where we're at with that and what the possibilities are this year and into the future of dealing with the non-market change as our industrial class and our residential class do continue to grow. We want to make sure that we're being cognizant of new revenues that might come about because of that, and that we're spreading them across the taxpayers that we want to spread them across intentionally in order to achieve our goals. So I'm happy with not making any specific changes today and waiting for more information on the non-market change. That would see us giving second reading to our budget at the next meeting potentially, or I'm not sure if we would be better to wait for information on non-market change first. We probably could go either way. Okay.
I don't mind waiting, Madam Mayor, till we see the non-market change, but I like our budget so far.
Great. Okay. All right. So I think we will move on then to public input period and question period. Twyla, did we receive any questions today?
Sorry about that. Yes, we did, Madam Chair. We have one question, and it's submitted from Mr. Roland Smith. And on the last page of today's agenda, and in response to question 38, and question 38 is captured in your question and reply sheet included in your agenda with regards to where is the dam funding and oil cleanup. It goes on to say, it says that $233,000 was allocated from 2020 reserves to repair the Mclean Mill Dam, but the money was not spent last year and the dam was not repaired last year. Also, the project does not appear on this year's project list. The dam repair was projected to cost $353,449 in 2019. What is the current estimate for the dam repair and what is the status of this project?
Thank you. Andrew, are you able to speak to that?
Yes, I can speak to the amount that was in the financial plan for that project, and that remains in there. So it's a prior year's project that was allocated funding. So that 233,000 remains in the financial plan from 2020, 2024 for that capital project. So it's a work in progress item.
Thank you. And CAO, is there any update you can give on the status of that project?
Madam Mayor, I'm going to refer to or defer to the Director of Engineering, who may be able to give us an update. If not, we'll bring that to a future meeting.
Great.
If I could give an update by next week, that would be very good for me.
Well, I think we expect you to give an update today with a couple months here, having background on every single project. No, that would be great. Thank you very much, Rob. Okay, and any other questions, Twyla?
No, nothing submitted, Madam Chair.
Wonderful. Then with that, any other questions from council? Seeing none, would somebody like to move adjournment?
Madam Chair, oh, sorry.
You can't.
Sorry to interrupt. If I could just quickly draw to the attention of members of the committee, just the timeline that we had proposed when dealing with the review of the financial plan. And you'll see we find ourselves February 16th at your committee of the whole. On March 1st, there will be an e-town hall that takes place. It will be 7 o'clock in the evening, and I will just share the City Connect ad, which is identifying opportunities that the public can engage at that particular meeting on March 1st. That said, I know there was some comments on the part of members of the committee that talked about whether to give second reading to the bylaw at your February 22nd regular meeting, which is just around the corner. Staff would look to invite council members to give second reading to the bylaw, as that formally opens up discussion and debate on the financial plan, and certainly in advance of the public engagement taking place by the e-town hall. So that will be provided to you on your meeting Monday to consider giving second reading as presented today at your committee of the whole.
Great. And I did notice that when you go to the city's website right now, there is a banner right across that invites you to sign up if you want to participate in the e-town hall. So it's really nice to see how early we're getting that out there, just to make sure that everyone's aware, and through a variety of means, people have the opportunity to sign up.
Yes, and to add to that, it will be a different structure. We're going to be doing the webinar platform. So people will have to register by going to our website, signing up themselves, versus contacting the corporate services department. So it's a little bit different, but it'll allow for that direct engagement with yourselves, who will be panelists that evening.
Great. Councillor Solda.
We're going to put this in the newspaper for those who don't have computers, so they'll understand what's the change, the new format.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With that, would somebody like to move adjournment?
Move adjournment.
Moved by Councillor Poon, seconded by Councillor Corbeil. All in favor? Carried. Thanks very much, everyone.
Yeah.